I was waiting.
He sat through 3 red lights.
It's 6:34. I wasn't going to start until you were here.
Then I had to pull her out of the elevator.
Okay, as you can see, they have moved our room. I really want to say thanks for, that's because all of y'all are interested in this. And I know it's difficult, but it's encouraging that everybody wants to dig into the harder stuff. Last week I had my mom and dad here. This week I have my mother-in-law here.
All right. Oh, okay.
And I don't know if any of y'all were here when it was Pipeline. I, of course, was not. But they were a part of it when it was the other location. When it was Pipeline instead of Legacy. They were there for a year or two or something like that. I don't know, maybe. She can, how, 6 years?
Welcome back.
Well, there you go.
A year or 6.
So, anyway, she's here. Lynn Caruso is her name.
Some of you weren't born.
I was 3.
Something like that. All right, we're going to get started here. The point of this class, and should we close the doors? Because I'm loud, and I've already been told from the marriage class that they can hear me the whole time in there. So they're probably happy to get me shifted over across, get some more air.
They'll be marrying one of the apostles.
The deaf appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
So my mom can't hear. She has her hearing aid blasted on max, and you have to she has to read your lips, so you have to look at her and yell, or she can't hear you.
I can tell them what
So I will talk like this to her.
Better than that.
Is that how she went deaf in the first place?
that comes in stern.
Okay. The point of this class is to learn how to learn the book of Revelation. That's kind of what I'm going with. The main controversy, the main point of contention, or what to figure out, what everybody wants to try to figure out, is who is the harlot. That's where probably 90% of the debate comes from the book of Revelation. I contend that you need to know the Old Testament to be able to interpret the book of Revelation. You're going to see throughout this class how many times John draws on Isaiah, on Jeremiah, on Ezekiel, on Joel, on Daniel. You have to know that stuff. And really, huh?
No, I was making a bad joke.
Oh.
You were quoting all those names. I said, it sounded like the reindeer. Joel, up, Hezekiah.
Oh yeah. Well, so the people in the first century that were receiving the book of Revelation, this coded message, when they got it, they didn't have to sit through a class to learn, whoa, what is all this weird stuff? Whoa, they already knew it. Why? Because they didn't have the New Testament yet. It was not written down. It was literal letters being passed around, and not all of them were written. But they knew Isaiah, and they knew it extremely well. They knew Jeremiah. They knew Ezekiel. So when they see all of these symbols that are listed in Isaiah, they knew what they were reading. Put yourself in their shoes. Hey, if I were to get this message and I knew Isaiah very well, how would I interpret it? That's the approach that I'm taking. Church of Christ notoriously focuses on the New Testament. Probably a good thing. Okay, that's the covenant that we're under. But you can't know Revelation without knowing the Old Testament. Otherwise, you just start making up definitions. You start making up meanings to the metaphors, or just flat out taking it literal. We're going to be Isaiah 1:21 only tonight. Okay, does somebody want to read that for me?
See how the faithful city has become a harlot.
She once was full of justice, righteousness used to dwell in her, but now murderers.
And who have we been talking about here in Isaiah chapter 1? What does verse 1 say? The vision of Isaiah, son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. And then he starts, last week we covered the heavens and earth, the leaders and the people, and you're going to see that nonstop. You nonstop see that in here. He's talking about Judah and Jerusalem. And he says, hey, the once faithful city, you used to be good, but you went and played the harlot. You used to have righteousness in you, and you started murdering all my prophets and saints and all of that. So right away, right at the very start of the major prophet of the major prophets, in the first chapter, he's already calling Jerusalem the harlot. Now we're gonna cover that, but we're gonna start off in Jeremiah chapter 2. Everybody turn to Jeremiah chapter 2. And I'm gonna go through the summary of a few of the verses. You can read them yourself, and really what I suggest is go home and read it slowly. Read chapters 2, 3, 4. Read them slowly. Check your cross-references. Always check your cross-references. Okay? He tells Jeremiah, chapter 2, the very first part of his prophecy is chapter 2. Isaiah, right at the beginning, hey, Jerusalem, you're the harlot. Jeremiah, hey, Jerusalem, you're the harlot. Ezekiel does it. Hosea does it. Do y'all know what Hosea is about? Hosea chapter 1? What happens in Hosea chapter 1?
He gets married to a lovely lady.
God has him marry a harlot so that she will leave him. So that he can illustrate to the Jews that he's doing Israel, he's doing the northern 10 tribes. This is you. You're leaving. You're playing the harlot. He says, go to Jerusalem. Go cry to Jerusalem. This message is to Jerusalem. You were a holy people. I think the translation said that it was a righteous place. They were holy. They left God, verse 5, if you're keeping up. He says, I brought you out. I did. Your husband, the one who's taking care of you, providing for you. I brought you out of Egypt to this land of really, really flowing with milk and honey, right? We all know the children's stories. But you made it an abomination. And then read verse 8. He starts talking about the pastors, the rulers, the ones in charge of taking care of the people, feeding the flock, showing the way, whatever metaphor you want to use. He starts getting on to them for the next few verses. And then in verse 12 it says, be afraid, ye heavens. I'm not going to repeat last week, but hopefully I showed well enough that the heavens equals the rulers. Because if you take it literally, it makes me think of The Simpsons. Right? Y'all know what The Simpsons is. That's that famous meme, old man yells at clouds. Hey, heavens. It's not literal. It's not literal. If you take it literally, that's what it makes me think. Verse 11. They're spiritually committing adultery. They're playing the harlot with false gods. I think in that verse, or one of the other ones, it says sticks and rocks. The idols. Verse 16, verse 18, he starts getting on to them for turning to other nations, playing the harlot. Turning to idols or other nations is the same thing. You're not being faithful to God. Jeremiah 22, verse 20. For of old time I have broken thy yoke, and burst thy bands, and thou saidst, I will not transgress. I took care of you during your troubles. I took care of you. And you said, okay, yeah, I'm not gonna sin anymore. I'm not gonna do that. And then everywhere you went, when every high hill and under every green tree thou wanderest, everywhere you went, you played the harlot. He planted them a noble vine. They played the harlot. They loved strangers. They chased after strangers, Gentiles. Playing the harlot. Remember Zechariah? Ezra, Nehemiah, all of that, not Zechariah, Ezra, Nehemiah. That's what they're doing. They're chasing after all of these. He told, get out of those marriages. They're going to lead you astray. Be ashamed and afraid, ye heavens, ye kings, ye princes, ye priests, ye prophets, ye people who are supposed to be shining the light so the regular people can go on the correct path. Be ashamed. You played the harlot with idols. You were my bride, and you have forgotten your attire. You have forgotten the bridal attire, the marriage clothes. And we're going to get into that at the very end. This is my favorite part of the whole lesson. And verse 34. You are guilty of the blood of the innocent. You were once faithful. You played the harlot, and you're guilty of the blood of the innocent. Watch how those three things keep popping up. Then you get into chapter 3. Just continuation. Chapter break, I don't know why it's there. You left me. You cheated on me. Now you want to return to me after playing the harlot. You're all polluted and stuff. That's what he's saying.
But you know, one thing, and I think it's true of people today, Jeremiah writes, but you say, I'm innocent. I'm not doing anything wrong. And that's why.
They would claim that.
Yeah, they would claim it. That,
Clearly not accurate.
and that's what we do today.
The stuff that is in Isaiah, the stuff that is in Revelation, not written to us, absolutely written so that we can learn from it and not make those mistakes. Not do the dumb stuff they did.
But we are.
We certainly do. As a nation, as people, as it's gonna keep repeating. They kept repeating it over centuries and centuries.
Have you seen that meme? It popped up on my phone from not even anyone I know. It just popped up, but it was, you can't, it's something like you can't murder your baby on, Thursday and then go sit on your pew on Sunday.
I haven't seen that.
Well, it's there, and there's a
But they
picture
do.
of like a baby on it. It's just moving. But that's what I think some people are doing.
Or
For sure.
rob your neighbor and then go sit on the pew.
Yes. Wow.
Okay, here we go. He says, you've played the harlot, you've polluted this land with your whoredom. And then in verse 6, he kind of starts the part 2 of this thought. He says, hey, the northern tribes, you notice how they cheat, and they've been gone for a century when Jeremiah's doing his work. They've been gone for a long time. Have you seen how the northern, you saw the northern tribes, right? He's talking to Judah and Jerusalem. How they cheated on me, how they played the harlot. Yeah, you saw it. And I saw when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel, the northern 10 tribes, committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah, who he's talking to here, feared not, but went and played the harlot also. You didn't learn exactly what you're saying, Carol.
Yeah.
They didn't learn. They saw it. They saw what would happen. They didn't learn. And that's recent history, relatively speaking, for them. It came to pass in the lightness of her whoredoms that she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and stocks. And yet for all this, her treacherous sister Judah had not turned unto me with her whole heart, but feigningly saith the Lord, and the Lord said unto me, the backsliding Israel had justified herself more than treacherous Judah. Judah was worse. What happened to Israel? Because they cheated on God and got divorced. Who did it? You know. Who
You mean who overran?
who made them gone?
The Assyrians.
The Assyrians come in, wipe them out. They're gone. Completely gone. The northern 10 tribes exist no more. So they're wiped out. That he divorced them. He's removed them. But Judah is worse. How come they don't get that? How come they don't get that?
There's gotta be a remnant.
You're spot on. But that could be he could do the remnant at any time.
Yes.
What?
And he did.
What else? You're like at the same time on the remnant. What happens? Think green letters. It's not on here. Christ. And brought Christ into the world yet.
Yes. He
So
did.
it could wipe them out.
Right.
But they were worse. They were going to get double. They were going to have the worst time ever. Because they were cheating on him in a worse way than Israel. Turn, back. He's going to give them a chance. He gives them chances. He gives them centuries. They're in the first century. When they switch over to Christianity, he gives them a space to repent. He gives them this 40-year transition period between Christ and the destruction of Jerusalem. He gives them time to get the word out. He gives them time to go through Acts chapter 2, to go through Acts chapter 10, to go through all of the conversions and get everybody to understand, hey, you're not under the old law anymore. Switch over. That takes time. It took a lot of time. It took time for some of the apostles to figure that out. How do we know this is not talking about coming out of Babylonian captivity? I'm gonna take you. What he's saying here, O backsliding children, said the Lord, for I'm married to you. Let's act like this is coming out of Babylonian captivity. This is written before they come out of Babylon. I think this is written before they go into it. I could be wrong on that. Somebody can fact check me on it.
Well, what happened on Jeremiah's watch?
Yeah, this is the beginning, was it?
Taking away all, yeah,
So they're going into it, right?
maybe.
But like specifically, what year was the first chapter written, or third chapter, or third chapter. Anyway, not really important for what I'm trying to do. I'm gonna take you one of a city. I'm gonna take a small number of you. I'm gonna take two of a family, two of a tribe. There's not gonna be that many of you that I'm going to bring out of this troublesome time that you're going through. Babylon being the type that was immediately in the forefront of their minds, but he's really pointing forward to the first century and the time, the persecution that they were going through. Acts chapter 1, verse 8. If somebody read Acts chapter 1, verse 8, I was going to read it later, but just the first half of it, you'll know when to stop.
But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth.
Is that 8:1?
No, it's 1:8.
You said to me.
Oh, you want 8:1?
I'm sorry.
That's
My
okay.
fault. 8:1.
You didn't recognize that.
Won't be the last time I do that.
You were like, what is she
Wait, what? That's
reading?
a weird translation. Acts, yes, I don't know, 50-50.
And Saul approved of his execution, and there arose on that day a great persecution against the church in Jerusalem.
There you go, that's enough. There arose a great persecution against the church in Jerusalem. So they're going through it under Babylonian captivity. They're going through it to the Assyrians in Isaiah's time. They're going through it in various times through history. They go through it a lot in the Judges. And they go through this great persecution against the church there in Jerusalem from the Jews. And who was the biggest persecutor of the Christians? Saul. Right? That's what I was talking about. So how do we know this is not talking about coming out of Babylonian captivity? The timing. Remember my slide at the intro of this class. The when is what we're going to be focusing on the most. When are Isaiah, when is Jeremiah, what are they talking about? Are they talking about stuff during their lifetime? Are they talking about stuff in the time of Christ, when Christ comes riding into the town on a donkey? And remember what I said the clues were. You got Christ coming, you've got the direct references, or you've got the Gentiles coming into the church. Jeremiah 3:15. Just keep reading. Here's 14, here's 15. Hey, I'm going to bring a remnant, not out of Babylonian captivity, but out of this Jewish persecution. I'm going to bring a remnant into the church, the New Jerusalem. Jeremiah 3:15 is fulfilled in Acts 20, verse 28. He's going to provide them pastors, shepherds, people that could guide them with understanding. Because what happened before? They would see something, but they would not see it. Their ears were closed. Words would be spoken they could not hear. They couldn't understand anything. But then you get to the New Testament, and it says, hey, remember these verses? Now we're undoing this. Now you're going to be able to understand. You're going to see that 4 or 5 times. It's in the Old Testament. Many times it's fulfilled there in the New Testament. Many times they say, hey, remember when Isaiah said this? It's now being fulfilled today. May or may not be enough to persuade you. We'll go to the next verse. And it shall come to pass, and in that day, they would never think of the old covenant again. They would never think of the Ark of the Covenant. That should be triggering. Well, hey, they're switching over. They're not going to think of the old covenant, because when they're coming out of Babylonian times, they're still under the old covenant. They're still thinking of that stuff. This should be a big-time trigger in your head of, well, they're not thinking of that anymore. There's got to be a new covenant. There's got to be the New Testament. The times of Christ, the New Jerusalem. They're making the transition from Judaism to Christianity. I've already said that 50 times. And it's day 3 in here. Not enough for you? Oh, just go to the next verse. And at that time, the New Jerusalem, the Church of Christ, Sion, here, the new Sion, the new version of it, would be the throne of the Lord, and here's your big key. This is unmistakable. All nations would gather together in the New Jerusalem. That cannot happen under the old law. Not just cannot happen, it was not allowed. Go read the end of your books of history. They got in trouble for it. The exact opposite. It's not Babylonian captivity, because they come out of Babylonian captivity. They're freed by the Medo-Persian Empire. Cyrus is a good dude to them. But they're not allowed to have all the Gentile nations. All nations would gather into this new version of Sion. This is your key. This is one of those 3 things that I said at the beginning on how to study this book. You look for these things, and all the rest of it starts getting a lot easier to understand. Because these are easy to spot. Here, this is kind of cryptic to me. Okay, that doesn't really tell me when. You send smart guys whenever, and they probably did. This one's a little more obvious. But that is super strong to me. The next verse. I think I forgot to put up 3:18. In those days, Judah and Israel would be united as one. Does that happen when they come out of Babylonian captivity? Not even close. Not even close. And they're united under Christ. I don't know if Jeremiah alludes to that, but this is the exact same passage as the two sticks in Ezekiel 37. You have Ezekiel 37 is one of the greatest chapters in my mind to explaining the book of Revelation. You have the first half is what? What's the most famous Ezekiel passage? Anybody know it? Was it like LSU football? No, it's the Valley of Dry Bones. The LSU football, I guess, is the shadow of the Valley of Death or whatever, Death Valley. It's the Valley of the Dry Bones, where it says, hey, you see these bones? This is the whole house of Israel. And then the second story there in Ezekiel 37 is he's like, hey, you've got these two sticks. One represents Israel, the northern 10 tribes. One represents Judah. Put them together, and you're all going to be one. You're all going to be reunited under King David. And he doesn't mean literal King David. He means the type, anti-type. Who was that told me you hated it? You were the one that told me. The prefigure. Okay?
No, I understood the premise of everything, but I just hated the word anti when it doesn't mean against.
I know, I was like that too.
It's just, it's not that I didn't understand what it is, it's just that I hate to read a word that says anti something and it doesn't really mean that.
So the pattern and the one that follows the pattern. I'll say that. Does that make sense?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So David is a type. He is the pattern. Christ follows after that pattern. He's this king. This analogy is very strong in the Bible. We're going to cover this a lot. You have the flood. You have them going through the Red Sea. That's a type. That's the prefigure. That's the pattern being set up. They were in danger of death. They went down into the water. They came up on the other side, and they were saved. Well, our baptism follows that pattern. Right? We go down, we're in danger of death. We have death. We go down into the water, and we come up. There's our salvation. Type, anti-type. Figure, or prefigure, figure. I'm not sure how to use it that way, but that's what it means. So he's going to unite them under King David. Read that Ezekiel 37 passage when you go home. It's good stuff. The first part is talking about the Valley of Dry Bones, is talking about the Church of Christ. The second part, when he unites them two, both under Christ, he's talking about the Church of Christ. That whole chapter is about the first century. And again, what did they read? What did Christians in the first century read? The ones who were receiving the book of Revelation? They knew Isaiah like the back of their hand. They knew Jeremiah. They could quote, this was all they knew. They didn't know the new stuff. When they started hearing Corinthians and Romans and all this, it's like, oh. But when they heard all the symbols in Revelation and weren't told what they meant, they already knew what they meant. Not from divine revelation, but from knowing the Old Testament. They knew it well. The Jews continually played the harlot. They were married to God, but they kept committing this spiritual adultery. They kept doing it. He would tell them not to, and they would just keep on doing it. They were worse. You're gonna see later on in our study, they received double. They were worse. The treacherous Judah was worse than her sister, Israel. And then chapter 4, and this is really important here. My notes aren't the greatest, but this is really important on the timing. Because they played the harlot, he's going to destroy them. is going to divorce them, just like he did his sister, except it would be a more bitter divorce, because they were worse. And you could go read I've got some notes up here on circumcision on Harlot. You should be familiar with that. That's New Testament teaching. In Jeremiah, the harlot is getting destroyed when the Gentiles would be able to be a part of the church. In Revelation 16, 17, 18, the harlot is getting destroyed during that generation when the Gentiles would first be able to be part of the church. Ephesians chapter 2 is one of my favorites. Who was it that did that? I think it was you. You gave me the Acts 10, right? Who was it that gave me the Acts 10? Yeah. You did the application. You did the real thing. I was like going for the explanation. I'm like, oh, her answer is better than mine. Let's still say A+ for that. Well, that's what Jeremiah is talking about. When all nations would come unto Mount Sinai, this new Jerusalem, this new bride that he's getting married. He was replacing the old one. And think about Revelation. If you've been reading through it, you should know there's two very prominent figures in there. There's the harlot that's getting put away, and right after that, there's the new bride. Chapter 19, chapter 21. I'll show you the verses here in a second. The Jews knew. The Jews that were switching over to Christianity, they knew Isaiah 1:21. They knew Jeremiah chapter 3, chapter 2. They knew Ezekiel. They knew Hosea. They knew Micah. They knew all of these things. So when they see the harlot, and hey, it's going to get destroyed, when the Gentiles would be able to be a part of God's faithful, which is a new thing, it was a new weird thing, I was like, oh. Because they didn't understand that before. We're going to talk about the veil way later on. They didn't understand it. So when they read the book of Revelation, they knew. When you keep the symbols the same, the heavens and earth, the harlot, when you keep it the same as what it was in the Old Testament prophets and apply it to Revelation, it can't mean anything else. Let's take a look at some of the characteristics of the harlot in the book of Revelation. Isaiah 1:21 says, how the faithful city became harlot. And most of my notes here, the next few slides, are going to be, it's not Rome. A lot of people say that it's Rome. I would say a majority of the church, because it got stuck in a preaching school somewhere, and now it's spread everywhere. Ruining church autonomy. The faithful city has become a harlot. Isaiah says the faithful city turned harlot. What about in Revelation? Was the harlot faithful at one time? Read 18:23. Somebody read 18:23 out loud. Revelation 18:23. Stay in Revelation most of the rest of the night.
The light of the lamp will never shine in you again. Happy voices of brides and grooms, you will never be heard in you again, for your merchants were the greatest in the world, and you deceived the nations with your sorcery.
The light of the candle would no more be seen in her. What does that imply? Having a candle meant what?
Light.
That's the literal thing of it, but get spiritual one. What's the metaphor?
God's with them.
God is with them. God is with them. Somebody read Revelation 2:5.
Remember the height from which you have fallen. Repent and do the things you did at first. If you do not repent, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place. I'm gonna
Got
remove
it.
the light.
I'm going to remove the light. Your candlestick is going to be removed. You're no longer with me. You're no longer the faithful city. The harlot, Jerusalem, was once faithful. The harlot was at one time faithful. Anybody want to explain how that applies to Rome? It doesn't. It doesn't. The voice of the bride and the bridegroom. I think your translation said brides and grooms. I think it's bride and bridegroom. The church, God's Old or New Testament church, married to God. God the Father in the Old Testament, Christ in the New Testament. The voice of the bride and the bridegroom would no more be heard in thee. Implying that at one time it was. When John is writing this, Rome never had that. Doesn't get close. If anything, the opposite happens with Rome. It eventually gets Christianity. But Jerusalem was the once faithful city that had become harlot. The candlestick was with her, and it got removed. The voice of the bride and the bridegroom was with her, and never again when she's destroyed. He switches over to Christianity. He's not going to go back to them. Rome doesn't feel that. Now murderers. The faithful city became harlot, is full of righteousness. Now murderers. Revelation 17:6 says, the harlot was drunk with the blood of the saints and the prophets. The blood of the saints and the prophets. 18:24, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Revelation 16:6, for they poured out the blood of the saints and the prophets, and the blood hast thou given unto them to drink. They are worthy. We're going to tie that down here real quick. They're worthy of this wrath, God's wrath that they are getting. That's the harlot in Revelation. It's the harlot in Jeremiah. Hey, you were once faithful. You played the harlot on me. You were worse than your sister in the north. Now I'm going to destroy you. Turn or I'm going to destroy you. They're full of murderers. Revelation. The Gospels. Look at Luke. Luke and Matthew. You'll see these a lot. And I will send them prophets and apostles. Because in her was found the blood of the prophets and saints. Saints, apostles, same thing. The prophets and apostles, and some of them they shall slay and persecute. The blood of the prophets, which was shed from the foundation of the world, would be required of that generation there alive then. May be required of this generation, the one Luke is living in. The harlot, the cheat that used to be faithful, that used to have the candle, that used to have the voice of the bride and the bridegroom, but now was full of murderers, that blood was going to be required of them, of that generation is the one that was going to pay the price. Not the one in Isaiah's time, not the one in Jeremiah's time. They got their temporary captivities and invasions and stuff to, hey, straighten up, I need to bring Christ to the world. Matthew 23:37. I told you I was going to go Matthew 23, probably every class. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets. Acts 8:1, not Acts 1:8, says that the church was going through this great persecution. The Roman, the persecution under Nero doesn't start until 64 AD. And it's a short-term thing compared to what they were going through at the hand of the Jews. The Jews have been doing it for centuries, if not longer. Matthew 23, you need to read that chapter. Hey, are y'all familiar with that chapter? Anybody? He is going off on the scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. I could just see him. When I envision him saying it, I think he's foaming at the mouth. He's like me to my kids, if you don't take out the trash. So, I may have done that once or twice.
Now, I'm trying not to go too far afield, but looking in Revelation 18, you've got the great city of Babylon, you've got the metaphor of the harlot. How do those interact, if at all?
So I will get there eventually.
Okay.
But what the quick answer is, the persecutor of God's faithful.
Okay.
Okay? I go through great lengths to show that later on.
Okay.
Okay? Because obviously Babylon's not around anymore. Babylon in Revelation represents something. We're trying to figure out what Babylon the great harlot.
Or
Whore or harlot, either way. No, not harlot. Not a little whore. I need a drink after that. You get into that with Egypt too. Okay? In Isaiah, after they're said to be the harlot and guilty of the murders, they're destroyed. In Matthew 23, 24, they're destroyed. Revelation 18, they're destroyed. These things are all the same thing, guys. This is I say Christ coming, his death, burial, and resurrection is event 1A for mankind. There is no event that is as important as that singular event in the timeline of all history. The second most important event is his marriage to the church, the bride. This putting away of Judaism and bringing in Christianity so all people could be part of, all Gentiles, Jew, Gentile, the Hebrew, the Greek, all of that.
Do you think Isaiah and Jeremiah, Ezekiel, do you think they understood
Ooh,
what they were?
I don't know. I've asked that.
Because that's a huge leap that they're predicting, but I don't know their
I don't know.
understanding.
I don't know. I will try to see if I can figure that out, but I've read some stuff that they didn't know. They didn't even know what they were saying.
Yeah,
Because they're just told the words to say and they go say it.
I know, so that's interesting.
Well, it's kind of like Daniel, Daniel 9, it's kind of,
Oh yeah, he's asking.
he's asking,
He's like, what's this mean?
and God's like, nope, that's it.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Probably
I think
not.
that's exactly right.
Well, and then we also have the example of the 12 disciples when they're sent out and they're kind of given the words and the
What do we
means
say?
to-
What do we say?
Yeah, and they don't know what they're saying and they don't even know how they're doing the miracles. They almost
I
have
think
no
that's right.
knowledge, they're just doing the work.
Yeah. That's the way I lean. I don't think they did, and I think that's the way most people lean.
But even if Isaiah doesn't understand what he's saying, we get a chain. Tell me if you think this flies. In Acts chapter 8, there's the Ethiopian eunuch. He's reading. He's in a chariot. He's reading from the scroll of Isaiah, in Isaiah 53, right?
He says, how can I understand this?
How can I understand this? Philip comes up to him and he says, and it's asking questions about lamb led to the slaughter, right? And he says, is he speaking of himself or someone else? And it says Philip started there and preached Jesus, right? So there we have Philip claiming that the identity in Isaiah 53 is absolutely Jesus. Okay, and then you see in Isaiah 53 that there's a redemption of Zion, and you can kind of sort of trace the steps back, and so you can land on, well, even if Isaiah didn't know it, that question of intended knowledge is laid open with that statement, Philip identifying that what's been written about in Isaiah, even if Isaiah didn't understand it, is absolutely about Jesus. And you can trace it backwards then from Jesus to the marriage of Zion, to the daughters of Zion, to the harlot, and it's like the same thing.
I definitely think the prophets knew a lot more than the people that were getting the message.
Oh, yeah.
Did they understand it all the way? Clearly no. Daniel doesn't. And he keeps asking. He's really interested because he keeps asking. It's not one time he asks. He asks like 4 or 5 times. When are you doing this? When are you doing it? It's not for you to know. Just seal up the words of the book. Right? Did I read this one yet? I don't think I did. I think I misspoke a word. We would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. This is the Jews there in the first century. Hey, no, if we lived long ago, we wouldn't be like them. We're not that bad. Christ says, yeah, don't lie to yourself. You are the children of them which kills the prophets. I send you prophets. I send you wise men, scribes. Some of them you're going to kill and crucify, so forth and so on. And upon you, upon this generation, may come all of this blood. All of these centuries of blood, your fathers and you. It's time to pay the piper. Whatever that means. A little bit of a break here, then we're going to get back to the harlot. When I started studying this, I did not have the internet, I told y'all that. And we slugged our way through it, and we came up with this. I think this book is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and switching over to Christianity. And then I want to say it's maybe like 2010 or something like that, 2012. My brother and I, we went to a pizza place, and we got a laptop, and we were blowing and going on the internet. And we just started running into all these really old dead guys that believed the same way we did. And I was like, I was a little deflated that I didn't come up with it. It was just a young, stupid ego thing, right? But then at the same time, it was really reassuring and comforting. Okay, I'm not the first guy to say this. Andreas, where that is? Says in 500, it's not hard to find those who apply this passage to the siege and destruction of Jerusalem by Titus. Talking about Revelation. This guy in the 9th, 10th century. Here then were manifestly shown to the evangelists the things that were to befall the Jews in their war against the Romans in the way of avenging the sufferings inflicted upon Christ. When the evangelists received these oracles, the destruction in which the Jews were involved was not yet inflicted by the Romans, meaning the book of Revelation was written during Nero's time, not during Domitian's time. All pointing to Jerusalem, the one being destroyed, getting this ultimate destruction, being the harlot. Kind of goes on with what we're saying here, but I wanted y'all to see that. It's not just me. Some really old dead dudes also say it. And that was kind of from my understanding, that was the only view for like 1,000 years. It's not until you get into 13th, 14th century that you start getting in, oh, it's the Pope. It's the Pope. The Pope is the harlot. I might not be wrong. I just don't think that's what this is talking about. Turn to Revelation 11. More on the holy city. So the city in Revelation 11, the harlot, a lot of times are coupled together. I think it's accurate. They will trample the holy city. What is the holy city? It's always been Jerusalem for 42 months. When was Rome ever considered holy? It's not. It doesn't fit that. 42 months. Was Rome ever trampled under 42 months? No, it doesn't fit that. Rome decays over centuries, a couple of centuries. And at their end, they just kind of stopped.
And when Rome is eventually destroyed, it's quick. there's no occupying force that retains the city of Rome. The Vandals come and go, they don't stay.
Are you talking 410? When are you talking?
476.
476. Rome's not even there anymore. Rome has not been the capital at that time for well over 100 years. You've moved the Western Empire to Constantinople.
Yep.
You've moved the Eastern Empire, no,
Eastern
to Constantinople, Western to Ravenna. Rome is a nothing at that point in history. They just come in and whatever. But as far as the empire that we're talking about here, it just they just give up. It's like they kept having emperors die, assassinated, one after another, like every 2 years. And then finally, after one got carried off, a young one, I think, got carried off into captivity, never heard from again. They're just like, who's next? And I'm like, nope, I don't want that job. And I said, okay, we're just done. We're not gonna have one. People kept living, but they just stopped. 42 months, that Rome is not trampled underfoot, 42 months. Jerusalem is. It's very well documented. Their war with Rome is called the 7-year Roman-Jewish War. Half of that, half of 7 years, half of 84 months, that's 7 years, is 42 months. Well, guess what goes on in the first half of the war? They come in, Roman armies come in, and they're on their campaign against the Levant, all of the land of Israel. And then on the Tishbi D'Av, on the 9th of Av, 70, what we call 70 AD, the temple's destroyed. The siege ends, and in one day they go kill everybody in town, destroy the temple. Very, very famous day, very infamous day, I guess. Judah and Jerusalem, they fit the 42 months. They were the holy city. Rome was not either of these things. Verse 8, Christ, it says, where our Lord was crucified. Christ was not crucified in Rome. Jerusalem was spiritually called Sodom and Egypt. They're called Sodom 1,000 times. We're going to be studying the Egypt part at a later date here. Jerusalem was where Christ was crucified. This is the verse where Rome people say, see, they reigned over many kings. It's accurate, they did, but that doesn't preclude, it doesn't rule out Jerusalem, because they are told that they are going to reign over many nations. David goes in and he conquers all of these kingdoms to take the land. Yes, I will freely admit Rome does it better, but Jerusalem also does it. And it might be a spiritual thing anyway. Not going to get into that. Rome's in, I say, when it's talking about Rome, I say the empire, not the city, not the specific city. Because Rome ended as the city of Rome ended as the capital, like in the 300s, I think. It just falls apart. That empire falls apart over a long period of time. Jerusalem, when they break the gates, it's in a day. It's in a very short amount of time. Matthew chapter 21. Christ is sitting there with the disciples. He's looking at Jerusalem, and there's this fig tree. This is pretty cool. He says, hey, if you have faith and doubt not, you shall not only do this which is done to the fig tree, but also if you say unto this mountain, unto this kingdom, unto Judah and Jerusalem, be thou removed and cast into the sea. Just like this fig tree that withered up and died, cast it into the sea. This kingdom, Judah, Jerusalem, represented by Jerusalem, cast it into the sea. Revelation 18:21. An angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea. That great city Babylon was being thrown down. He just got finished telling them Jerusalem was the one that was going to be cast into the sea. Here Babylon is getting cast into the sea. Got to speed up because I want to get to my last slide here. There was only one way a Jew was worthy of getting fire death, a fire as a punishment, being burned as a punishment. That's if the high priest, the daughter of not high priest, the daughter of any priest, played the harlot. She profaned her father, she would be burnt with fire. Well, guess what happens to God's children who played the harlot? They were burned with fire there in Revelation 18:8. And this is my favorite one. This is the one that just locks it down for me. Not that the others haven't. That first slide of the voice of the bride and the bridegroom and the candle, all that. This is the one that cannot be anything else. The harlot is literally wearing Aaron's high priest garments. Revelation 18:16. That great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones. When I was reading through, when I was young, and I read through Exodus 28, I think it was in my 20s when I caught this, I was like, no way. No way, because I tried to avoid the first 5 books a lot. Leviticus, oh, that's terrible. You're going to make the breast, let me do here. They shall take gold, and blue and purple and scarlet, and fine twined linen, of gold. The breastplate, gold, blue, purple, scarlet, fine twined linen. And then you get the precious stones. They're going to be set in gold, and they represented the people. These clothes that Aaron is wearing, that the harlot is wearing, represent the Jews. They're wearing the same clothes. That is not coincidence. That is not accident. This is not random. The harlot is literally wearing Aaron's clothes. He's the representative of the Israelites, the Jews. The harlot is Judah and Jerusalem. The harlot is getting replaced. They're getting divorced. They're being replaced by the bride. He's never married to Rome. Rome was never faithful. That's it for tonight. We're going to go back to that Romans 9:1. I kind of skipped it, and I was going over it again. I'm like, ooh, that's too important. So we're going to go back to that one, and then we're going to start in chapter 2. That one won't take the whole time. So we'll do that in chapter 2 next time.